Sometimes we get to a point in our show where we have to readjust or change our cadence, and that can feel really frustrating, but also can feel like we're doing something wrong. That is not the case. Today, we're talking to Shanti Joy Gold all about her journey into starting her podcast and some shifts that she's making from season 1 to season 2 to ensure that she is showing up well for her audience and also protecting her own capacity for giving to the show. We also talk about Shanti's background in sales and why it's important to sell ourselves in a positive light, but also from a place of genuine interaction when we are either selling or asking someone to be a guest on our podcast. Please join me in welcoming Shanti to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Shanti. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. So if you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your podcast.
Hello, Alicia. It is so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I am Shanti Joy Gold. After a career in corporate sales leadership, primarily in the media industry, pivoted to being a professional executive coach. Coaching was the favorite part of what I did in my sales leadership roles. I was very fortunate in my career. I was grateful for it, enjoyed very much. I really enjoyed a lot of the role. And the coaching part was my favorite, helping individuals and teams to work on the goals that they had for themselves, build on their strengths, focus on areas of opportunity, and then excel. And that's my favorite work. So when I found out that coaching was its own thing, I was ecstatic. And so it took me a minute to see what was right in front of me, but I came to focus on the people I most wanted to serve, and I guide underrepresented people to confidently thrive in their careers by being fully themselves. That led to, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, my podcast, which is really an extension of that work. It's called Stories We Haven't Shared, and it's a Campfire style interview series where underrepresented people talk about the extra layers we navigate as we wind our way into the already complicated career landscape.
Oh, so good. I love it. So when it comes to sales, and I feel like lately I've been having a lot of conversations with people around sales and like why we need to be selling ourselves. But to take that a step further, how do sales and maybe the training that you've had in sales, what are some lessons maybe that you've learned from that have allowed you to work with people, and like maybe the correlation between selling yourself and like representing yourself in a way? So how has that kind of correlation happened?
Yeah, I think it's looking at sales differently than we probably traditionally think of it. I thought coming out of college that I had no interest of going into sales because I envisioned it as the traditional, almost used car salesman type of thing. And what I came to realize is that it's really just about genuine connection, building trust with people, and talking about what it is that you offer, aligning it with what they need, and communicating clearly about what the benefits are. And there's a creativity to it that I never anticipated, a humanness to it that I never anticipated, and it's never boring, which I like. For the most part, there's a spontaneity and a different everyday aspect to it that I really enjoy as well.
Nice. And how can we maybe use that idea and that concept to represent ourselves better? I know we had a conversation recently on the podcast where we were talking about when you're pitching people to be on your podcast, now that can feel a little intimidating, especially if it's like a big guest that you're like, there is no way this person's going to say yes. Why even bother? But like, we need to put ourselves out there. So what are some things that maybe we can reframe from that coaching lens, reframe to say, no, I can do this?
Yeah. I think it's just about making sincere, genuine connections with people, and perhaps a little vulnerability on your own part, finding something that they're doing in the world that you genuinely think is amazing and referencing that. Then talking about what you do, how there might be alignment, and really leaving it up to them to be at choice to say yes or no, because either is okay. Yes is better, but it's okay. That's what sales is about. Yeses or nos, the maybes will kill you, right? So just being as real and in the moment and finding what it is about that person that is the seed of why you're even reaching out to begin with, and talking to them or writing to them about that thing as a starter. And typically people sense the sincerity.
So, two things that I want to point out that you said that I think are so important to this. One is the genuine connection, right? I mean, we've all gotten those DMs where it's like, do you even care like, at all?
Yeah,
right? Like, we've all
totally.
gotten those. Or the email pitches for our podcast as podcast hosts that are like, how many people did you send this abs trash pitch to?
Right.
So number one, that genuine connection. But then you also said something that I think that can go with sales or literally anything that we are doing. And that is understanding that the decision is in the other person's hand. And I think that's so often as business owners, when we're selling our products or selling our services, and especially as women, it's like, I don't want to bother, but like, this is this cool thing I have. And it's like, why are you acting like the person that's going to spend money with you is not an adult capable of making their own choices? Like, they're not children. We don't need to infantilize them. You can open the door and it's either a yes or a no. And if it's a no, that's okay. The answer's already no. right? So,
yes. You're not going to change it.
Exactly. So I think that is such a great reminder to put ourselves out there to do the dang thing. like sell if we need to, or sell our podcast or sell ourselves as this great thing because one, we are awesome, but also like they have a choice and we can simply just put it in their hands. I can think back to there was this author that was my big guest for season 1 for my podcast, my hobby podcast. I remember I did not want to slide in her DMs. That was just not something I really felt comfortable doing. So I filled out the form on her contact page and I was like, she gets back to me, cool. If not, cool. Either way, right? Like, I think part of me didn't want to see the left on red in the DMs. And so I was trying to protect myself in some way. And so like a week later, I got an email from her and I was like, hey, I'd love to be on your show. I responded. I don't know if you got it. Her response had gone to my spam box. And I was like, I am so happy that she like reached back out and was like, yeah, I'd love to be on your show. And it's like, just put it out there and see what happens. You never know. And like I said, the answer's already no before you even put it out there.
Yeah. And one thing you said that I want to piggyback on is follow up. And look, like you said, we've all been on the receiving end of the incessant blind follow up that is just skin crawling.
Yeah.
And there are people, people have lives and they do get busy and sometimes it simply gets lost in the shuffle. So I will typically follow up. Probably, it depends on the situation. Just use your gut. But some follow-up is okay. Some gentle, hey, just checking in. I know things can be crazy. Just if this is something that resonates, just wanted to pop in one more time. And I did have someone who said, oh my God, thank you. I lost track of it. And like, let's book some time. So I think the follow-up is not annoying if it's done again in that same spirit and still allowing them to be off the hook and then knowing intuitively when it's time to just let go, move on.
Yeah, if it's been months, come on.
Exactly.
Okay, so you launched the podcast. And so when you say underrepresented folks, what is that definition just for the listeners who maybe don't know?
Yeah, minority groups. So, traditional groups that you might think of, LGBTQ plus, Black, anyone of different ethnicity group, had trans, had non-binary, veterans, disabled. The podcast also includes a space for allies. So allies have been guests. And frankly, I believe that the definition of underrepresented will expand over time. And it's really anyone that views themselves ultimately as an outsider for one reason or another. And that can be in the traditional ways that we think about, the traditionally, historically marginalized groups. And I think it'll expand over time as well.
Yeah. So when you're introducing your podcast, you said Campfire Side Chats. And so tell me a little bit more about what that means when we're thinking about like the podcast kind of format, as well as maybe the discussions that you're having.
Yeah, I really wanted to anchor it in this idea of storytelling. When we're talking about marginalized groups, there's a lot going on out in the world that's pretty divisive and polarizing, and that's not at all what I wanted the vibe of this to be. I really think stories are powerful. People can connect with them on a human level. And when I started to think about, okay, well, let's take that a step beyond. So we're telling stories. Where are we telling them? This idea of a campfire and just sitting and hanging out and talking and looking up at the stars and casual but poignant, deep types of conversations was what I was hoping for. And I'm very grateful that I've gotten that and even more than I bargained for in the best possible way.
Yeah, I used to go camping every year to New Jersey, out by the ocean, maybe. It was by a lake or something, and we'd go there every year. And a lot of it's blocked out. Trauma.
And
And it was always like July, so it was always super hot. But I remember being at like the bonfire toward the end of the day, especially as I got older and like got to hang out with the older kids and being there and just like playing games and having fun and like having those deeper conversations and then thinking about like even as an adult, like my mom would have like a little fire in the backyard and then going out there and like having those more like I don't know, something about the night and
yeah.
like that fireside really allows you to be a little more vulnerable or like share stories that are really impactful. And maybe it's that it's darker and they can't maybe see your expressions or the tears or whatever. And so I love that kind of analogy, right, to the podcast of having these more intimate conversations and the storytelling and the things that maybe we might feel a little uncomfortable saying in the quote unquote light of day, but can be said in these intimate settings. So, as you said, that has been like some of the progression. How do you get your guests to feel comfortable with that? Especially if you're maybe pitching someone that you don't know. And I know for season one, you had quite a few people that you already had some type of a relationship with. But if it's someone that you maybe don't know, what are some things that you do to maybe prepare them for that more intimate, let's go a little deeper, let's not just fluff the surface. Like we want to get deep.
Yeah, two things come to mind when you ask that. One is the trailer. I'm tough on myself, but somehow, and thank you because you were a part of my launch, so I'm going to give you a plug on all of it, including the trailer. I feel like the trailer really captured the essence of the podcast. I also am a casual guitar player, so I wrote Guitar Strum and it's playing in the background during the trailer. And between that and the language that I used, I feel like it captures the spirit of the podcast as well as what the conversations will look like.
Mm.
So I share the trailer when I do blind outreach. And then when I do have the opportunity to connect with someone after they've accepted the opportunity to explore the podcast, I just spend time talking to them like we're talking now and trying to be very present to their stories and making them feel seen and heard and comfortable and hopefully asking some questions maybe that they don't normally get asked, not in a shock and awe kind of way, but in a real, I'm really interested in you as a human kind of way. So I think the pre-interview conversation, which I always have, hopefully also sets the tone for the podcast.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important part of having those deeper conversations. If you don't know someone, there's only so much you can do in a 1 hour-ish span of time to get deeper.
Yeah.
But for someone who's maybe a little more reserved or more uncomfortable, getting a little deeper right off the bat without knowing someone, that pre-interview can be really important. And I'm not someone who does pre-interviews or has done, but I think that each of my podcasts I've done have not lent itself to need that pre-interview.
Yeah.
And so if listener, if you're someone who is maybe struggling to get your guests to go a little deeper, maybe a pre-interview might be something worth exploring to make the person feel a little more comfortable. Or maybe you add an extra 30 minutes to the beginning of the interview time to get that kind of rapport established before you get into the conversation.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add, I mean, the nature of this podcast is about storytelling, but I find that as I can get people to start just telling stories, that's where that comfort level starts to really evolve. And again, who doesn't like people to listen to their stories, right? So then you just have to pay attention. You just have to listen and respond. But getting them talking, getting them comfortable, getting them to share and open up through storytelling, it's built into my podcast and also I think very effective for expanding the conversation.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, you're going into season 2. At the time of this recording, you are just launching season 2, but it's a few months out at this point when our listeners are listening. What are some things that you're kind of addressing as you're going from season to season? And I mentioned this a little bit before we hit record, but a lot of people who have a business and also use their podcast as an extension of their business don't always go seasonal. And I think that a lot of it is because we see these big name people who have huge teams who are every week or twice a week, right? I know myself, I'm twice a week, and that's fine. That's what works for me. But it's not going to work for everyone. So, what are some maybe shifts and things? And I know this because we work together on
Yes.
this, but what are some things that you're shifting from season 1 to season 2 to ensure that you still love your show and want to keep doing it?
Yes. So the first thing I did between seasons was reach out for feedback because I feel like I'm too close to it. And obviously, you were a big part of my trusted team. So I reached out to you to get feedback, which was exceedingly helpful. But I would recommend that if you're taking a pause. The reason also that I did seasonal is because you recommended it, because it offers the opportunity, if you ever want to take advantage of it, for a built-in pause. And it turns out I wanted that. I felt like that was in order. So having that option to wrap a season, pause, and come back, I loved that flexibility. The two big changes I'm making going into season 2, I was biweekly, so I was releasing an episode every other week. I love doing the podcast. Love it. Love everything about it, except maybe writing the show notes. And I found that it takes a lot of time.
Mm.
And I didn't mind it at all. And I have a business that I'm running and building. And I realized that the podcast was starting to take up an inordinate amount of time on my calendar, as much as I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So in season 2, I will be going from biweekly to monthly. And that feels a little stretchy for me because I don't know, it just does. Is it enough? Will people listen? But, I'm trying it. And the worst thing that happens is somehow that translates into now no one's listening. And I can always go back to biweekly. But I'm going to change the cadence. And I can tell you that right now, the freedom that I feel from that is enormous. And it allows me to stay in that kind of excited, joyful, grateful space of the podcast, which is where I want to be. So that was one shift. And the other was, and again, this is a suggestion that you made. When I started the podcast, I have my business. I see the podcast in a lot of ways an extension of my business. I also want it to be just pure on its own in terms of its intention. They kind of rotated near each other during season 1. They were very similar audiences and themes, but without a real direct bridge, other than some quick mentions in the intro or outro. And you recommended getting a CTA, a call to action, into the episodes themselves. And I thought, well, how do I do that in a way that feels organic and that doesn't hurt the integrity of the podcast? I just refuse to hurt the integrity of the podcast. So I have developed something for my business called a thriving assessment. It's on my website. I built it and then promptly forgot about it. Although I think it's a great tool to allow people to step back and assess areas of their life where they're excelling and maybe areas they can focus for some increased joy and happiness and success. And then I thought about the podcast and an opportunity to be maybe a little bit tighter about the takeaways. So I created a segment called the Thrive Takeaway. So on every episode, a guest will share a Thrive takeaway, which is kind of the, if people only remember one thing, what would you want it to be question. And so I think that's good. It's actually an improvement to the podcast because I think it tightens up the takeaways. And then I use that as an opportunity once that's been shared to refer the listeners directly to my thriving assessment on my website. So it feels like a win-win. Those are the two big changes, are the cadence and the call to action.
And I love how you said, like, I'm going to test it, especially for the cadence, right? Yeah. Let's test it out. Let's see how it works. Let's see how it feels. And then what's the worst that could happen? Okay, you've prepared yourself for the absolute worst, right, and then you can change it, right? Totally. Which I think is so important, especially when we're making these shifts. I mean, there's no, as much as the podcast bros would want to tell us that there's a rule book on how we're supposed to podcast, there is no rule book. Every show is so uniquely different. Every host is so uniquely different. Every audience can be so uniquely different. And so we have to do what's right to, one, like you said, keep the integrity of our show, but also not burn ourselves out in the process and make the money we need to be making to have sustainable lives, to be able to keep podcasting. So I think what you're doing is great. And I think that if someone's listening and they're like, I'm also feeling very much like that, here's your permission slip, right? Yeah. Test it out, see if it's going to work. Give yourself seasons if you need to. I mean, I've seen people do it where they're like, all right, I did 100 episodes now. That's like over 2 years worth of episodes if you're going weekly. And then they decide to take a season break. Like, you get to choose what a season looks like for you. Right. There's no rules to it. And I think that's one thing that I love about podcasting is that we're able as hosts to cater it to what we need as individuals, but also kind of drag our audience along for the ride as well, which I think can be fun.
Yes, I agree.
So if people are like, yes, please, I want to listen to your show and I want to know more about what you're doing in the world and listen to these incredible stories. Now, I've listened to this show, so I know you have some incredible stories on there. And some of them are so incredibly impactful, especially having come from the corporate world myself. And some of the stories, I'm like, yep, me been there too. And so if someone wants to listen to your show or check out your freebie that you have, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, my website is shantijoygold.com, ShantiJoyGold. And you'll find the Thriving Assessment in the upper right-hand corner. You'll find a tab for the podcast, which has all the episodes. So that's probably the one main place I would direct people toward.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we have links for that in the show notes, as well as the YouTube description for anyone doing other things. Thank you so much, Shanti, for being on and sharing about your podcast and all the incredible work you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much for being a part of the journey with me. I just want to plug Alicia real quick if I can.
Thanks.
Alicia, for me, defines the under-promise, over-deliver mentality. And that doesn't mean that she's not very clear about the deliverables she's promising when she works with you. It just means she goes above and beyond, and she does it in a way that feels joyful and giving. I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.